Okay, origin points, right? That's that little orange dot in the center of your mesh. Notice however I move the mesh, the dot stays in the center. Now, there are ways and reasons to move it. Now, one of the first ones is click on the mesh, hit Shift, right mouse button to move your 3D cursor. Now, the 3D cursor will go on the surface of whatever side or object you click on, right? So it will no longer be in the center. It'll be on the front surface. But move your 3D cursor where you want, select your object, then go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D cursor, and boop, it popped right down there. Now, if you notice, if I hit S to scale, it now scales around the 3D cursor, which it did before, but the cursor is moved to the bottom of the object, so it scales differently. If I were go into edit mode by hitting Tab, and I hit S, it scales from the center of the model instead of the origin point, which is another thing. If you move around the entire mesh, right, the entire mesh is selected, the mesh will move, the origin point stays wherever it was in object mode, which is interesting and useful. Now, I'll show you how. This bit where, scaling it around the origin point down there, I don't find so handy. But, now let's go here. Object, set origin, origin to geometry. It's going to put it back in the middle. Let's move the mesh down. Go to side mode, hit S and Y to constrain the scale to the Y axis. Now this has use, right? If I was to hit R for rotate, it's going to rotate around the origin point, which it always did. But now that the origin point is moved, right, it's moving like a door, which has all sorts of very useful uses, my friend. If we go into this file, now, this is a case that I modeled up for a pocket operator. And you can see at the top and the bottom, there are these hinges. And inside the top part of the hinge, there's going to be a little magnet, and there's going to be a magnet in the case down here. Now, what I did, this is the center, this is the turning point of the hinge, right? This is where the hinge pin will be. Oops. You can see here, there is the origin point of the hinge pin. This is the top part of the hinge. I moved the origin point down to the center of the hinge pin. Here's the magnet. I moved that down to the center of the hinge pin. And as all you do is you select the object you want to move the 3D cursor to. You hit Shift, right select, and you can zoom in crazy amounts, right? We're looking at it in such tiny, tiny amounts, it doesn't really matter. But I like to get it as exacting as I can. Now, if I select both the magnet and the top part of the hinge, when I hit R to rotate, it's going to rotate like it would in real life, right? Like if this was a functional hinge, this is how it would rotate. And I can use that to test and see how it's going to interact with the objects that it's supposed to interact with. See, this would be the pin, this would be the magnet in the case, and this is the magnet in the hinge. Do they line up? Now I can tell for sure that they do. This is not in the way. This is not in the way. If I hit B and hold down Shift, I can deselect the case. Now I can move the hinge and I can see how it interacts. Is it in the way? Nope. Anything in the way? Nope. This is so helpful. It keeps you from doing revision after revision after revision because you need the actual object to see how it works. You can test out a lot of the function in Blender before you even do your first print. Now, odds are you will still have to do a revision or two, but it cuts way down on the amount of work you need because you can see how your objects would interact. So helpful. Now, it's a little different if you're animating versus modeling for 3D printing. You may not want your origin points, all over the place. Because I've tried to do like assembly videos where all the parts fly together and form an object, and because I've moved the origin points in certain places, they rotate weird and don't do exactly what I want to. So you got to keep in mind what you're doing with your origin points and what you're using them for. Otherwise, you're good. But it is so helpful to see how objects would actually interact in the real world.